In today's story, life stories will take you to witness how Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men in the world, accidentally encountered two desperate boys at a fast food restaurant. It was here that he did something no one could have expected, bringing hope and changing their lives forever. Join Life Stories to explore this emotional tale. On a weekend afternoon, Elon Musk suddenly felt the need for a moment of quiet. It hadn't been an easy day. Endless meetings, a mountain of emails, and weighty decisions about the future of SpaceX and Tesla pressed heavily on his mind. Even someone as energetic as Elon, who often spends hours pondering improvements to spacecraft or electric vehicles, was not immune to exhaustion. To find some relaxation, Elon decided to drive to a nearby fast food restaurant. It wasn't a fancy choice, but today, all he needed was a simple moment, free from pressure. However, just as he stepped into the restaurant and stood in line to order, a small sound behind him made him pause. The anxious whispering of two boys caught his ear. Their voices were urgent, hurried, as if they were discussing something of great importance. Something in that seemingly trivial story caught Elon's attention. He had no idea that this seemingly simple moment would lead to a memorable story, changing not only that day, but also the future of the strangers he happened to meet. Even someone like Elon Musk, renowned for his grueling work schedule of 80 to 100 hours per week, sometimes needs a moment to escape the daily grind. That day, Elon felt an unusual urge pulling him in a direction he didn't expect. It wasn't towards luxurious or high-end dining, but something very specific, something delightfully ordinary, fast food. And his choice? A popular item from Taco Bell. The thought might seem at odds with the image of a man envisioning the future of self-driving cars and humanity's colonization of Mars. But in that moment, he wasn't the CEO of Tesla or SpaceX. He was just a regular person craving a familiar taste, a Crunchwrap Supreme, a dish he used to enjoy during the simpler days before fame and fortune found him. Sometimes, even those who live with their sights set on the stars need something simple and grounded. For Elon Musk, it was a taco. There was something about this humble meal that made him feel connected, as if transported back to a distant time, before billions, before Tesla, before spacefaring dreams. In that small moment, he wasn't a world changer. He was just an ordinary guy. It reminded Elon of his younger days, when life was all about experiments and discoveries. He was once a young man spending hours in front of a computer, immersed in lines of code or challenging engineering projects. Back then, fast food was a lifesaver during those intense stretches. Without much thought, Elon got into his Tesla and drove off, treating himself to a bit of nostalgia he hadn't realized he needed. This simple drive, however, would lead him into a story that would change not only his day, but also the lives of a few strangers he had never met before. Elon drove his Tesla to a nearby fast food restaurant, not far from where he was working. It was a typical suburban spot, nestled between a convenience store and a small shopping center, a place no one would expect to see a billionaire stopping by for a quick meal. But it was precisely this ordinariness that appealed to Elon. As his Tesla quietly glided into the parking lot, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. What would the media say about this? He thought. Elon Musk ditches work to eat tacos. A headline so catchy it needed no embellishment from a journalist. Stepping out of his car, Elon looked like any other regular person. No bodyguards or assistants trailing behind him. No aura of a billionaire entrepreneur. Just a man in simple attire, seeking a moment of calm amidst the hustle and bustle of life. Little did he know, in just a few minutes, unexpected events would unfold, completely transforming this quiet afternoon. Elon walked into the restaurant, looking just like any ordinary guy, dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans. He bore none of the trappings one might associate with a billionaire. The eccentricity or flamboyant style often linked to his name was nowhere to be seen. Elon had his own way of staying grounded in public, especially in moments like this when he was alone. No security team escorting him, no assistant bustling about with calls or messages, just him and a hunger that needed satisfying. As he stepped through the door, a small bell chimed, a familiar sound in any modest eatery. Inside, the restaurant was entirely unremarkable. A few diners sat scattered across the tables. The aroma of grilled meat and melted cheese lingered in the air, and the hum of the drink machine added to the atmosphere. This was exactly what Elon was looking for, a simple moment, away from the spotlight. But he didn't know that this quiet would soon be disrupted by a story that would leave an indelible mark on him. Approaching the counter, Elon quickly scanned the menu even though he already knew exactly what he wanted. The Crunchwrap Supreme had always been his go-to choice whenever he visited Taco Bell. Today, however, he decided to indulge a little and ordered two, because sometimes life calls for a small indulgence. But before he could place his order, he noticed the cashier's eyes lingering on him. The young woman blinked, trying to keep her composure. That face, she recognized it instantly. It took her a second to fully register that the man standing before her was none other than Elon Musk, the renowned billionaire who had revolutionized the tech industry. Though startled, she managed an awkward smile. "Welcome to Taco Bell. What can I get for you?" Her voice quivered slightly, but her professionalism quickly steadied her. Elon, with a gentle smile, kept things simple and unassuming. "I'll have two Crunchwrap Supremes, please." "Thank you," he replied. The cashier handed him the receipt with a smile, saying his order would be ready in just a few minutes. Elon nodded and quietly stepped aside to wait. In the meantime, he did what most people do when trying to pass the time. He let his mind wander. His thoughts quickly drifted back to the tasks ahead. SpaceX was nearing major milestones with Starship. Tesla's new AI project was progressing rapidly, and the bold ideas for the Boring Company's tunneling systems were beginning to take shape. His schedule was an endless chain of missions, challenges, and monumental decisions. But right now, in the small, humble space of the Taco Bell restaurant, he felt something different. The usual pressures seemed to momentarily fade away. In these few minutes of waiting, Elon focused on something refreshingly simple. It was like hitting the refresh button for his mind. Sometimes, moments like these bring a rare sense of balance that can't be found in boardrooms or meticulously detailed plans. While waiting, Elon noticed a few customers coming and going, but no one seemed to recognize him. He cherished this rare moment of peace, a rarity for someone constantly surrounded by the spotlight and public attention. Blending into the crowd without anyone caring about his fame or power was a surprisingly soothing experience. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. At first, he dismissed it as a fleeting thought, nothing worth paying attention to. But as he collected his order, that changed completely. He froze. Elon heard two hushed voices behind him, the voices of two young boys. They were talking about something peculiar, something that surpassed even the boldest dreams he had ever envisioned. Their words echoed clearly in his mind, stopping him in his tracks. He had no idea what was unfolding, but there was something in their tone that he couldn't ignore. His instincts told him this was no ordinary conversation, and he felt compelled to listen more closely. The whispers from behind seemed to drift into Elon's consciousness. His hand hovered over the counter, about to reach for his wallet, but something in their voices made him pause. At first, he barely paid attention, assuming it was just the casual chatter of kids. But now, their tone carried an unusual urgency, as if holding a weight he couldn't ignore. Elon tilted his head slightly, just enough to hear more clearly without making it obvious that he was listening. One of the boys' voices, barely louder than a whisper, spoke quickly, an excited yet anxious rhythm that immediately captured his attention. "We have to do it tonight," one of the boys said, his voice urgent, as if he was trying to stay calm but couldn't hide the tension. The words rang with such gravity that Elon couldn't help but focus on their conversation. He realized he had stumbled upon something significant, a story he had no idea he would become entangled in just moments ago. "We have to do it tonight," the boy repeated, his tone desperate. "If we don't, Mom won't get better." Elon blinked, concentrating harder. He hadn't expected to hear something like this in a fast food restaurant. The other boy, seemingly the older brother, responded with a lower, more worried voice. "But what if we get caught? You know what they do to people who steal. It'll only make things worse." The word "steal" hit Elon like a punch. He furrowed his brow slightly, lifting his gaze to look toward them. From his new angle, he could see the two boys more clearly. They were just kids, no older than 12 or 13. They sat there with slightly hunched shoulders, as if carrying the weight of the world on their small frames. Their young faces bore an expression of tension and despair that seemed far beyond their years. Elon realized this wasn't typical childhood mischief. It was fear and pressure. Something was pushing them to the brink of doing something wrong. The older boy, with an expression that was both tense and determined, leaned closer to his younger brother. His voice was low but firm, each word heavy with urgency. "It's just money from the cash register. No one will notice. We need it, and I don't know how else to get money fast." Elon froze, his hands suspended in midair. His mind suddenly flooded with thoughts. This wasn't the typical mischief of adolescence. It wasn't the scheme of curious kids testing boundaries. This was different. He could hear it in the older boy's voice. It was the voice of desperation, of someone backed into a corner, where every path seemed to lead to a dead end. Elon furrowed his brow slightly, taking a closer look. From where he stood, he could see their young faces more clearly, etched with worry far beyond their years. Their small shoulders seemed to bear the weight of the world. What could have driven them, at an age when they should be thinking about school and play, to consider such a risky plan? Taking a deep breath, Elon knew he couldn't ignore this. This wasn't just about two boys. It was about the struggle for survival of a family somewhere. And he, with all the resources he had, couldn't simply turn his back and walk away. The whispers continued, and when the boy mentioned their mother, something in his words unsettled Elon deeply. His instincts kicked in. He had seen enough of life, its dazzling triumphs and its heartbreaking tragedies, to recognize that this was not normal. He knew what fear sounded like. And this wasn't the voice of two kids plotting harmless mischief. This was survival. Elon could hear the fear in their voices, a fear driving them toward desperate actions. These two children were contemplating something that could ruin their lives forever. That thought made it impossible for him to stand idle. The cashier handed Elon his bag of food, and he took it absent-mindedly, nodding without really paying attention. His mind was no longer on the meal but entirely focused on what he had just overheard. He didn't know their whole story, but it was clear they needed help, and he knew that if he walked away without doing something, things could take a much darker turn. Elon stood there, his mind racing as if solving a complex equation, knowing he couldn't just leave and let the situation unfold unchecked. Elon remained still, trying to piece together the fragments of the boys' conversation. The younger boy's voice was shaky, filled with worry. "I don't want to do this. What if someone gets hurt?" The older boy, clearly trying to reassure his brother, took a deep breath. His voice was low but firm. "We'll be in and out quickly. No one will get hurt. I promise. Just the cash. And then we'll have enough to pay for the medicine." Medicine. That was the word that brought everything into focus. This wasn't just a story about reckless kids. Their mother wasn't simply unwell. She needed medicine, and they were running out of time. Elon felt a deep pull in his chest, an indescribable but very real sensation. It was empathy, something he rarely allowed himself to feel, even privately. Yet, in this moment, it was undeniable. He understood the gravity of their situation, and it struck a chord within him that he couldn't ignore. He stood there, processing everything in his mind. His heart tightened as he thought about the boys' situation. He understood that they weren't troublemakers, but two sons desperately trying to save their mother at any cost. Elon knew he couldn't ignore this. This was a moment where he had to act, because if he didn't, they might do something that would change their lives forever, and not in a good way. Elon's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He knew he had to do something, but it couldn't be a rushed action. He couldn't just walk out and pretend he hadn't overheard. Yet confronting the boys directly wasn't an option either. It might frighten them, or worse, push them to act impulsively and make an even bigger mistake. This was a situation that required careful handling. Elon wasn't just a businessman or an inventor. Deep down, he was someone who believed every problem had a solution, no matter how impossible it seemed. Right now, those two boys were facing a serious problem, a problem that needed resolving before they made a choice that could haunt them for the rest of their lives. Taking a deep breath, Elon decided on an indirect approach. He turned back to the cashier, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing attention. "Hey, can I ask you for a favor?" he said, his tone serious but gentle. He had a plan just subtle enough to help the boys without letting the situation spiral out of control. The cashier looked up, her expression slightly puzzled but attentive. "What can I help you with?" she asked. Elon gave a small smile and said, "Could you add 2 crispy tacos to my order? I'll pay for them right away." She nodded, quickly adjusting the order on her screen. As she worked, Elon prepared for his next step. He turned to glance at the 2 boys and took another deep breath. He knew he needed to approach carefully, as if solving a complex puzzle where every move had to be precise. The goal was to help them without alarming them or provoking a rash decision. With the bag of food in hand and a calm demeanor, Elon walked over to their table. At first, the boys didn't notice his presence. They were too engrossed in their tense conversation to realize that one of the most famous men in the world was approaching them. He stopped in front of their table and, with a gentle tone, said, "Hi there. Mind if I sit with you?" The 2 boys were still engrossed in their plan. The worry etched deeply on their faces. But as Elon approached, the older boy looked up. His eyes widened in shock as he recognized the man standing in front of him. Elon gave a small, friendly smile, doing his best to appear non-threatening. "Hey, guys," he said casually, raising the bag of food in his hand. "Mind if I sit here for a bit? I think I ordered too much food, and I thought maybe you could help me out with these crispy tacos." The boys exchanged a quick, nervous glance. It was clear they were overwhelmed, realizing that one of the most famous men in the world was speaking to them. Yet, their tension didn't dissipate. Their bodies remained taut, as if ready to bolt at any moment. Elon kept his demeanor calm, gently setting the bag of food on the table before sitting down across from them. He knew that every word and action now required careful consideration. His priority was to make them feel safe and comfortable enough to open up. The 2 boys remained tense, as though ready to get up and run at any moment. But the mention of food, and perhaps the sheer shock of Elon Musk, someone they'd only seen on the news or social media, sitting right in front of them, made them hesitate. Sure," the older boy said, his voice uncertain. Elon gave a gentle smile, a silent attempt to put them at ease. He sat down across from them, placing the bag of food on the table. Slowly and deliberately, he pulled out 2 crispy tacos. He placed one in front of each boy. The boys stared at the food, their expressions a mix of confusion and temptation, though they tried to maintain their composure. The smell of the warm tacos and their evident hunger made it difficult for them to think clearly. Elon didn't rush. He let the boys open their food on their own, careful to avoid doing anything that might make them more anxious. His calm demeanor was deliberate, every action, every word, thoughtfully chosen. He knew that in a situation like this, patience was the key. As the boys hesitantly took their first bites, Elon spoke in the gentlest tone he could muster. "I overheard that you might be having a bit of trouble," he said, his gaze steady but non-intrusive. "It sounds like you're dealing with something really tough. I'm here to listen. If you want to talk." Elon's approach was starting to work. The boys slowly took a few bites of their tacos, still a bit cautious and wary. Noticing that they were beginning to relax, Elon decided to gently ease into the conversation. His voice remained calm and friendly, as though he were chatting with old friends. "I couldn't help but overhear a little of what you were talking about," he said, keeping his gaze warm and inviting. "It sounds like you're going through something really tough." His words made the boys freeze instantly. Their faces turned pale, and the older boy quickly became defensive. He looked up, his voice sharp and hurried. "We didn't do anything wrong. We were just talking. That's all." Elon nodded slightly, unfazed by their tension. He maintained his calm demeanor and responded softly, "I understand. You're not in trouble. I just want to help." Elon looked directly at the older boy, his voice soft and understanding. "I heard you mention your mom. Is she unwell?" The younger boy's eyes began to fill with tears, though he tried hard to hide them. The older boy hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly, still wary. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Our mom, she's really sick, and we don't know what else to do. Elon felt his chest tighten. The desperation in the older boy's voice only strengthened his resolve. He knew what he had to do, not as a billionaire, but as a fellow human being who understood that sometimes all someone needs is a helping hand offered at the right moment. Your mom, she's sick, isn't she? Elon asked, his voice gentle and filled with concern. The younger boy's eyes began to well up with tears, but he blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. The older boy, clearly trying to protect his brother, swallowed hard and reluctantly nodded. Yes, he replied, his voice shaky and choked with emotion. She's really sick. She needs this really expensive medicine, and we don't have the money. We've tried everything, but we don't know what else to do. His words hit Elon like a dagger to the heart. He looked at the two boys, feeling the weight of the burden they were carrying, a burden no child their age should ever have to bear. They weren't just struggling to survive. They were wrestling with a deep despair, trapped in a situation where every door seemed to be closed. In the older boy's eyes, Elon saw not just worry but a desperate determination to protect his younger brother and save their mother. He understood that feeling of being pushed to the edge, where every path seemed blocked, and that understanding only strengthened his resolve to act. Taking a deep breath, Elon kept his tone calm and steady. You're not alone. I think I can help. Those words were more than just reassurance. They were a promise that he wouldn't let them face this struggle on their own. We don't want to steal, the older boy continued, his voice trembling, nearly breaking, but we don't know what else to do. We don't have any other options. Elon leaned forward slightly, maintaining steady, empathetic eye contact. His voice was warm but firm as he said, Listen, I know you're scared. I know it feels like there's no way out, like every door is closed. But trust me, going down that path, taking money from this place, won't help. It will only make things worse. Not just for you, but for your mom too. The older boy lowered his head, avoiding Elon's gaze. His eyes filled with tears, and his voice broke as he replied, But what else can we do? The medicine is so expensive. And he stopped, as though the weight of the words was too much to bear. Elon could feel the desperation in those words. These boys weren't just fighting for their mother. They were struggling against a crushing sense of helplessness, something even adults find hard to endure. He knew he had to do something, not just to help, but to give them a glimmer of hope. Taking a deep breath, Elon spoke gently. You don't have to face this alone. There are other ways, better ways. I can help. I want to help your mom, and I will. But first, you have to promise me that you won't do anything rash. He looked into the older boy's eyes, his gaze steady and filled with a message of reassurance that he was here, ready to share the burden with them. The two boys looked at him, their eyes filled with doubt. They couldn't comprehend why Elon Musk, one of the most powerful men in the world, would want to help them. Are you serious? The older boy asked, his voice laden with skepticism. Elon nodded, his gaze steady and sincere. Absolutely serious, he replied. Listen, you don't have to go through this alone. There are people who are willing to help, and I'm one of them. I want to do this, not for any other reason than because I can. And I want you to know there's always a way out. His words were like a ray of light piercing through the dark cloud of despair surrounding the boys. They still hesitated, but in their eyes, a flicker of hope began to emerge, a hope they thought had been lost forever. There are many ways to get help without putting yourselves or your future at risk, Elon said, his voice firm but filled with compassion. I can help your mom get the medicine she needs and cover the medical expenses. You don't have to steal. And most importantly, you don't have to carry all of this on your own. For a moment, the space between them fell into silence. The two boys sat across from Elon, their wide eyes filled with a mix of hope and lingering doubt. Perhaps they had never imagined that someone, especially someone like Elon Musk, would be willing to extend a helping hand. The older boy, who had been bearing all the responsibility, slowly lowered his head. His shoulders, tense from the immense pressure, began to relax. as though the weight he had been carrying was finally starting to lift, even if only slightly. "Are you really going to do that?" the younger boy asked, his voice trembling, as if he still couldn't believe what he had just heard. "You're really going to help us?" Elon nodded, his expression gentle and sincere. "Yes, I will help. You're not alone. We'll figure this out together." The younger boy's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief. For the first time, the boys felt the warmth of someone willing to help, someone ready to share the burden they had been carrying for far too long. Elon smiled warmly, his gaze filled with sincerity. "Yes, I really will," he said softly. "And you know what? I don't want anything in return. All I want is for you to keep doing what you're doing, taking care of each other and taking care of your mom. That's what truly matters." The older boy looked at Elon, his lips trembling. The resilience he had tried so hard to maintain began to melt away. For the first time since Elon approached, he let out a deep sigh, as though a part of the world's weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. And finally, the tears he had been holding back began to fall. Elon reached across the table, gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly, his voice steady yet soothing. "We'll figure this out together." In that moment, there was no gap between a billionaire and two anonymous kids. It was simply one human being helping others, bringing hope to a place where there had only been despair. And in that moment, I believe Elon realized this was exactly where he needed to be. Not in a high-pressure boardroom, not on an important conference call, but right here, to lend a helping hand to two children who desperately needed support at one of the hardest moments of their lives. So, what do you think? Could it be that Elon's instincts guided him to this place? It's a testament to the magic of how a simple action can bring such immense hope. Do you know of any other heartwarming stories like this one? If so, feel free to share your thoughts with us by leaving a comment below. Life Stories always looks forward to hearing inspiring tales from you. Thank you for listening to the end of this story, and we hope to see you again in our next stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Life Stories.